Irene Ackerly couldn't stand to look at her engagement ring after my grandfather's affair. Jean Ackerly broke the single most important thing from my father's childhood and tried to dispose of the evidence. Theo Ackerly. It was what I dropped in and chose to take out. Lou Ackerly didn't drop anything in the toilet, but he dropped dead of a heart attack. Now, he can't say anything about the Ackerly woman anymore.
I loved the opening section to it of, like, the way that they set up the story itself with the narration, but also the chapters, and how they introduced each of the characters and what they were flushing down the toilet and why they were flushing something down the toilet. And I thought that that was just like such an offbeat way to start a story that I was really intrigued as to where the story was going to go, because the opening line is something like, you know, whoever says that you can tell a lot about like these women by what they flush down what they flush. And I was like, where on earth is this story going? I was so intrigued by it. It was that right amount of shock value, and then to have the rest of it as like chapters and kind of like slowly going through the story. And it wasn't just about the comedy, it wasn't just about the absurdity, which they did very well, but it was also about, like, they had grief, they had other themes, it did have layers to it, which if you're gonna believably pull off the other things, you do need some twist. Like, if you're gonna have comedy, you also have to have the other parts, otherwise the comedy isn't as good of a payoff. So I thought that they worked everything really, really well together.
Very beginning, I really love the way all the characters are introduced, like with the little like subtitles, like introducing who they are. I think that worked well, and the voiceovers, like being so monotone, worked so well because it made the dialogue like that more hilarious, because like she's saying like these outrageous things in like the calmest voice ever, and that really worked well. One of my favorite scenes was when they accidentally left Lou behind, when right after like he was pretty much, you know, put in a shoebox by accident. I think that worked well, and it really made the story that much more funnier. And I think all the actors did a fantastic job. And all around, I really enjoyed watching this film.
Dark humor played really, really well. I really enjoyed the straightforward, very monotone style of the narrator, and also how the film was divided into chapters. I think it just made it feel very quick, very concrete, and like no nonsense. The story of these three women navigating the death of Lou was very entertaining to watch. We see how each of them dealt with it in their own individual ways, but they all seem to come together, they all seem to come to the same conclusion at the end in order to finally put him, Lou, and themselves to rest. So it's just a beautiful story of grief, loss and grief and acceptance and moving on and solidarity despite differences. There was a whole lot packed into this little film, and I very much enjoyed it.
Shows us grief in generations in a very darkly comedic way. The world of the film, you know, is actually very brightly lit. Even the nighttime scenes have a lot of diegetic light in them, but the subject matter is very glim and dark in itself. And I think that helps show the contrast and the paradox that is grief, that is death. And we see them go through these stages. It's appropriate that it's divided up into chapters, because those almost represent the stages of grief as well. We see the anger, we see the resentment, we see the acceptance, ultimately. And although their version of acceptance is unconventional, to say the least, in how they treat the remains, it is nonetheless clearly a cathartic moment for these three women, and evidently the only thing they could do to be able to move forward. So it's an interesting story, because there is no right way to grieve, And I think this ultimately is just the reminder of that you have to do what's best for you and for your family, and at some point set everything else aside and come to the right conclusion that it's time to move forward now. We've remembered, we've mourned, and now we have to move forward. And it does that alongside being quite humorous and entertaining as well. So very well done.
It's just got such a distinctive tone, and it sticks to it, and it executes it well, and it carries through the entire thing. It's just got this great style to it. It's very true to itself, and it is funny. It's absolutely everything you could hope for in a short comedy like this. Just some really good performances with some good timing. The editing is really good. There's some subtle things that go on there, even with just little sounds and stuff, and just really nails it, and it all comes together beautifully.
This one was definitely one for the magazine rack. It was at its best. I actually really like the metaphor that Lou used to describe the three of them as women trying to hide their lies in the toilet. And then I thought it was a lot of good segues and transitions used to transfer from one idea to the next. Thought it was really clever. I thought this was a really refreshing take on death to us part and the grieving of a loved one. Visually, I liked the design of the family home. It was very lively. Visually speaking as well, I specifically like the correlation between when the girls were dropping things in the toilet to when Lou then just dropped dead on the grass on the yard. I thought as a whole it was really well narrated, and the tone was perfect, kept me guessing, and Flush Lou is certainly the exact opposite of a lackluster blockbuster.
I loved this piece. The writing of it was wonderful, and I thought the directorial choices were really innovative. I loved the kind of Wes Anderson style title cards and those cheeky cuts, the jump cuts, and giving certain aspects more visual focus and highlighting them through zoom-ins or extended shots, leaving the awkward pauses, and playing a lot with different rhythms to the piece. I thought very much worked well. The narrations read like this perfect kind of coming-of-age teen novel, but without any of the preciousness of it, but that real cynical angst that comes from a parent dying. But it still had some really quirky characters that felt fully realized, that helped bring levity to the piece. Also loved the setting of this place and this very wacky and prim home with an abundance of Victorian style to it that made it feel stuffy but also more silly. Really cool piece. I can't wait to see more from the creators.
Very satisfying to see someone like Madison, Stewart, Leonard appreciate and try to harness work that is close to, say, Wes Anderson, in that it's a dark subject such as death, friendship, the irreconcilable differences between three generations of women in the same family. Yet there is still comedy there that can be explored through a bewildered perspective, which is something that Wes Anderson is a master of, and I think that Madison Stewart Leonard gets it herself. It may not feel realistic, authentic. In fact, it has kind of a fable feel to it, dealing with a beloved father who's passed on, but they don't quite know what to do with the remains. And it's honest in that here are three women who have probably never agreed upon a single thing. Why should they agree upon what they should do with the poor man's ashes? Put him in an urn and put him in a closet? No, he's got to go. I like that end very much. And even though it was a very twisted, synopsis. I really appreciated the comical tone to it and the timing, the pace of comedy, the chapter segments to it. Again, it made me feel very much like I was watching a Wes Anderson picture.